All rise. The International Criminal Court now in session. Please be seated.
Good afternoon. I would like to greet the teams for the counsel for Dr. Friantoni, the counsel for the prosecution, and also counsel for the state of stupor. I would like the court officer to please call this case.
Thank you, Mr. President. We are sitting in a session regarding of defense of Mrs. Husnul Pitaloka against the prison Cambolization of confirmation of charge of aiding and abetting the crime of aggression crime were allegedly committed in the context of the situation relating to the crime of aggression against braavos.
I will now ask the parties and the participant in this hearing to introduce themselves. And I think I'll begin with counsel of the defense.
May it please the court. I appear the defendant. My name is Laras, and I appear alongside my co-counsel, Ms. Trisha. May it please the court.
Now, turn the prosecution. Can you present member of your team?
May it please the court, my name is Jessica and I appear on behalf of the prosecution with my learned co-counsel, Mrs. Husnul Pitaloka. May it please the court. Thank you, your honors.
Thank you. Finally, let me introduce the bench. Of my left is Mr. Doko, and to my right is Mr. Oktafriantoni. I am the judge in this case. Crime against humanity committed the territory. Now, the chamber will now process consecutively with the third issue shaping the subject matter to today's hearing. I will ask the court officer, please read the agenda that was established by the pre-trial chamber.
Thank you, Mr. President. This case arises out of allegation of crime against humanity committed the territory of braavos to the east bordering the stormy sea Salonga to the north and a steeple to the west. The appeals chamber seeks submissions of all parties and participants on the following issue. Point A, whether the indiscriminate nighttime search of the defendant's home and the seizure of her personal computers without warrant the evidence inadmissible. B, whether the humanitarian intervention described in the pre-trial chamber's decision and to constitute a manifest violation of the United Nations prosecution of the crime aggression and the Article 8 base of the ICC statute. C, whether the crime of aggression which was intended the Kampala amendment to apply only to high-level governor official in a position effectively to exercise control.
Thank you, court officer. We'll now give the floor to counsel for the defendant to present its case and to discuss the three issues that are before us.
Mr. President, Your Honor, may it please the court. The defendant is a lawyer and academic. She is being prosecuted for the most serious international crime. The defense requested that the charge disappear for three reasons. First, that evidence against the defendant could not be accepted in accordance with Article 69 of the Seventh Statute. Secondly, there was no crime of aggression, because our strike did not have the character of gravity and scale was a clear violation of the UN Charter. Third, the defendant did not satisfy the essential threshold requirements for aiding and abetting crime aggression. For the next argument, it will be present by Ms. Trisha.
All right, thank you, Ms. Laras. Please continue, Mrs. Trisha.
Thank you, Mr. President. I have two submissions to this. First, that there was no active aggression at the airstrikes or humanitarian intervention under customary international law. And second, in any event, that the airstrikes were not of the character to constitute a manifest violation of the UN Charter. So to begin, with the first point, it is submitted that a rule of customary international law has developed which allows for humanitarian intervention in certain limited circumstances.
All right. You could have, I think, rules allow you can additional minute, and I think my colleague has a question for you.
Yes, question is related to the requirement of 25(3)(c) as regards the demands for commission of crime to the extent the legal justification in this case was required. Is it arguable that her advice provided the legal justification to go ahead with the airstrikes?
Yes, Your Honor, even if her advice was of same assistance to the cabinet of a stupor or to James Bannister, it is submitted that does not reach the threshold which is required for a prosecution under Article 25. Preface, in the first place, it is submitted that the provision of one's of independent legal advice cannot go near satisfying that threshold, and so for those reasons, then I would ask the court to have regard to the wording of Article 25.
Okay, thank you very much. We will now having listened to come for the defense. We are not here for counsel for the prosecution.
Mr. President, the honors met please the court. My name is Joshua Yang, and I represent the prosecution in this matter. Affirm PTC success confirmation of charge on three separate legal grounds. First, the evidence in the record is that it's able under Article 69 of the Rome Statute. Second, as offset aerial bombardments manifestly violates the United Nations Charter, and third, her central role in giving the necessary legal sanction, given Targaryen aided and abetted a suppressed crime of aggression.
Just let me ask you a question now. What was the impact of the violation of the rights of the accused insofar as it should be applied to this case?
Your Honor, in this case, we will say that the impact of defamation on the right of the accused is minimal, and especially if I can draw an analogy from previous case where the court also considers the impact of violation on the strike. Uncertainty about the legality of the humanitarian interval, and in this regard considers the International Tribunal in its nuclear weapons advisors. The opinion note that international disputes regarding the legality.
If fact are real violation, now assume you will argue that they are real violation of my question. Why? On this fact for specifically, how low? Because you mentioned that it would destroy the fabric of human life and some infrastructure.
Based on Article 25, the three-bit states of Rome is particularly because all prosecution that need to be demonstrated in the patriarchal states are good reason. Your Excellency, I pay attention. Maybe I was given 1 minute just to conclude. I respect you to speak out your honors, especially because all of you believe in closing your respectful attention because this court was held in Lubanga. We therefore urge you to refuse to file an appeal and let the case continue. Thank you and hope this courtroom is fun.
Today, after a savage chemical weapons attack arranged by an oppressive and cruel regime against its own civilian population, this attack claimed the lives of at least 2,200 people. It is for this reason that amicus wants to emphasize the importance of interpreting the crime of aggression in the historical context in which it was structured as a means to hold those who fight aggressively to account. In both of the situation, we can see that clear and ambiguous violation in Article 24 are not clear and ambiguous violation of the general prohibition on the use of force. Thank you, Mr. President.
I think you're done about this.
Yes, Mr. President.
So, before you leave, I have a question for you. Is that on my understanding of the fact that it is true that your own strike struck a chemical facility that is located very close to the capital city and therefore there is a problem of population affected by chemical fumes?
Your Honor, let me conclude our observation. We would like to remind the court of the appeal standard that must be met by the defense to demonstrate the fact that the decision of the pre-trial room must be changed there.
Thank you. Well, the two bearing in mind that this case constitutes several firsts for this court. I'd like to remind you that in this instance, you are each allocated 10 minutes and that no team will be given more than minute for the rebuttal. Counsel for the defense, you may begin.
I will argue that this is a second legal error in relation to the prosecutor's submission, that the prohibition of the use of force between countries is the common use norm, that I will agree. But I will say and submit that humanitarian intervention is consistent with the UN Charter and has developed as a further exception to the ban third in relation to counsel for prosecutor. Depends on a number of priorities to show that independent lawyers can be held accountable for assisting and abetting aggression.
Question, you mentioned that we should look particularly to the states that are involved. Should we also then look at the state of the reserving and of humanitarian intervention, and what extent can they be considered persistent objective?
That lawyer can be sued for assisting and abetting the crime of aggression, Mr. President. Lawyers can of course be sued for urging and imagining aggression crime if they are in a position where they can meet threshold requirements based on Article case law cited by prosecutor referring to lawyers who are members of Nazi.
Delegates not, I quote, the judges will take into account and quote the formulation of Article 25(3) base was, I quote, not intended as a retreat from number Taurus produced and courts, but rather it embraced the exact same standards as in the Elam's case. I cited in my main submissions that defended Targaryen is liable as a result. We use your honors to dismiss this appeal and allow this case to process to a full trial. Thank you, and may it please the court.
Thank you, Counsel. We hear the last word from Counsel for the state of estoppel. You may now have the floor.
Your Honor, lastly, I would like to turn your attention to the consequences of the airstrikes at issue. Had the airstrikes been carried out in a strictly legal manner, in line with the collective security project and all of the provision of the United Nations Charter, would there have been any different? The answer is no. The use of force would have been identical. The number of strikes will have been identical. The location of the strikes will have been identical. Regrettably, the number of victims will almost certainly be similar, and most importantly, the consequences of the strikes will have been identical. Tools used for repressions were ultimately taken out of the hands of criminals to our submissions. We are a state who has to operate within international law and who is faced with every unknown viable choice, if not us, who, and if not now, when. Thank you, Your Honors.
Thank you, Counsel. I have to say the standard has been exceptionally high. You have given each team has given the bench a very difficult task. We will now have to retire and give very careful deliberation to see how we spirit this very standard demonstrated by each team. You have not made our job easy. All right. So the chamber will rise and we will leave courtroom. We will return for 1645, and by that time we have arrived at the sewage and answer.
All right.